What's up, everybody? Welcome back to South Fork Outdoors. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, make sure you click subscribe for new trail camera, shed hunting, fishing videos whenever I feel like posting them. But today we are back on the fishing upload grind. This is our first fishing video in a while, and because of my first time hitting open water this year, I would like to talk about the pre-spawn of bass fishing. Now, the pre-spawn is that time when they're first transitioning from their winter housing to their spring bedding areas in the shallows. And this is a prime time of the year to hone in on big bass, get big bites on pretty easy to use baits and styles. So today we're going to be talking about what baits you guys should be throwing, location, and tactics. So you guys can hone in on your pre-spawn fishing game. So stay tuned. All right, guys, so one of the most important parts of the pre-spawn is the bait you use. A lot of people say, oh, location, but really, you can really catch them anywhere, but you really want to be using the correct baits to catch them at the good spots. Combine the two, and you'll have good fishing. So our baits, I have a few of them written down here. We're just going to go through the list. Our first bait here, we have a lipless crankbait or a rattle trap. Being able to cover a lot of water in a shorter amount of time, fan casting the area you want to get with a lipless crankbait. Colors I would suggest: crawdad, shad, and bluegill. Any, smaller forage that bass could get an easy meal on. And because in the pre-spawn the water is usually a little bit colder, I recommend not just going full crank and just going all the way in. I would crank a little bit, let it sink, pull, reel down, crank a little bit, let it sink, pull. So make sure you're working the column, doing a column climb, and not just casting it and then reeling in at Mach 5 speed. Because then obviously the fish that are real finicky, they're kind of, on that finesse bite because the water is so cold usually, is, you're not going to get as many hits. So work it a little bit slower. And the second bait here, I have a spinner bait or a chatterbait. You can really use either one. I prefer a spinner bait because it tends to get the weeds off a little bit more, and it's got more of that flashing action than that boot, because when you do this, the spinner blade, it's, that turn of that blade, throws off the light and stuff like that. But a chatterbait has that, that, like, I don't know, you know what I mean if you fish them before. When you reel it in, it's all, you can feel the vibration of the rod. So if you're fishing a little bit more pressured area, I'd recommend to go with the spinner bait. But if you want to catch, more unpressured bass, the chatterbait's definitely a good option. And the third one here, we have the Wacky Rig Senko. Obviously one of my personal favorites if you watched some other videos, but a Wacky Rig Senko pretty much any time of the year will catch fish. But in the pre-spawn, it's really, really good because its ability to work the top part of the column, which we'll talk about later, but it's finesse and it's a quick moving bait if you want to make it that. You can put weight on it to sink it. You can go weightless and wacky, as I like to say, but it's just a very versatile bait, and it really works any time of the year, but it works the best that pre-springtime. And fourth may come as a surprise to you, but any kind of top water.
I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon?
Primarily baits that you don't have to fish by lily pads, so spooks, whopper ploppers, I would say glide baits, but not really. Now, this may seem weird, and I actually did learn this on a Brian Latimer episode, and again, we'll talk about the column later, but these fish are up high because the water is cold. Obviously, it's like below 50 degrees. It's pretty cold. And the sun, if you guys know how water heats, goes from the top down. Those fish want to stay warmer, they stay at the top. If they see that top water and they hear that whopper plopper, spinning by, they're going to get annoyed and they might hit it. So that's more your reaction strike. And the next bait I have here is the jig, or really any skirted bait will work well because I have, the spinner bait and the chatterbait up there. But a jig is really good in the later pre-spawn because that's when the fish are moving shallow into their spawning grounds, when you really get to start flipping jigs under docks and stuff like that. But the jig is really good if you can somehow get that really early bedding bass to, bite on. And I really like to throw jigs around structures such as docks, big drop-off areas where you can run it right along the side of it, and those fish will be able to hear the pounding of that lead head on there. And our last bait, we have a Ned rig. Pretty much just like the jig, you're looking for that odd bedding bass that will see that in their shallow area by their bed and will give you a quick reaction strike off of it. Ned rig is again a finesse bait, just like the wacky rig. So obviously smaller fish are usually a thing on those too. So they will catch more fish, but smaller fish. But all of these baits definitely will work for you during this time of year. So let's move on next to location and water column depth. All right, so like I said, our next topic here is location. And this really does not matter as much as baits, in my opinion at least, because during the pre-spawn, the fish are kind of everywhere. There's still days from the winter when the water's freezing and there's hard water and there's ice and stuff like that. But these are the three that I tend to cast on and have pretty good success with. So we'll start here, top of the water column. I did mention this earlier in the video. The fish aren't deep because when the water is so warm, or so cold, my bad, they're going to be up top because the sun is hitting that top and it's warmer. If you guys have ever been in the ocean, you go out a little bit deeper, you feel the bottom of the water is like cold, but the top is warm. The fish don't like to be cold, just like us, and they'll stay at that top. That's why I said top water and stuff is not a bad option here, but they'll stay at the top of the column because they don't want to be freezing cold in the depths. They want to stay in that, 1 to maybe 3 or 4 feet range to, stay warm. Next one, we have shallow to deep transition points. Now, this is my favorite. If you can find a spot where it goes from 9 to like 15 feet, and there's a steep transition up to like 2 to 3, maybe even 1 foot of water, that's going to be a great spot because the fish in the spring, they move up shallow and they bed, right? You've seen it before. If you've ever been to a pond in the spring, you'll see probably a lot of bass. But in the winter, they stay pretty deep. They're going to be hanging out there, collecting up forage and I guess scouting out beds. And once they want to move, they're going to come up that ridge and get to that spawning water. So focusing on those transition points, is pretty good. And really the only way to find a transition point is using a fish finder. So that's why I take my depth finder with me whenever I go ice fishing, even though I never use electronics. I like to take it and just see how deep the water is. And I make my own like topographic map of what I think the lake looks like. So I can, just have a quick reference of it, when I go back there in the spring. So, and then our last one, we have spawning water. Pretty obvious. Like I said earlier with the odd fish that's already in the bed with the jig and the Ned rig, spawning water is good to focus on because obviously in the spring, they'll be moving up to that shallow water, but they don't want to be posted there yet. So usually they'll be there, but they won't stay there. You could just see 1 or 2 fish kind of running around there. It really depends on where you are. If you have a lot of spawning water, I'd say hit this, but I wouldn't focus your whole day on hitting spawning water. If, you are pre-spawn fishing, I would focus on these 2 up here. But this one is always worth a try if you end up coming across any on your trip. All right, guys, and our last one here is tactics. Now, tactics is just something that will help you get more bites. And really the most important one, I think, is covering water, especially when you're in ponds. If you can cover as much water as you can, throw as much different baits as you can, you're gonna at least get something, right? Because you're throwing 6 different baits, all different parts of the column, all different parts of the water. Obviously, you're going to have a little bit of luck. So throwing something quick moving and just panning all the way out, and then maybe downsizing and saying, okay, I got bites here, but no luck here. You can kind of hone in on that area and then fish it more. This is everything that I have for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you do use any of these tips and you catch some fish with it, make sure you DM me on Instagram. There will be a link in the description. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, and I will see you guys later. Peace.